Welcome to the limited series podcast called Insight to Impact. On each episode, I sit down with leaders in the energy industry to talk about their career journey, learn about how they rose to the top of their game, and share their expertise and insights with you. I'll be having real, candid conversations with the people behind the executive job title to learn about what motivated them through their career, talk about the mentors that impacted them, and what comes next in their journey. You can find Insight to Impact wherever you get your favorite podcasts across multiple platforms. Stay tuned. Welcome, everybody, to the first episode of Insight to Impact. In this week's episode, we hear from Paul Turner, founder and CEO of the Commissioning Academy. Paul has an amazing story to tell about how he started his career and where he is now in the industry. From tinkering with toys and gadgets around the house, to building rockets to launch satellites into space, to starting the Commissioning Academy. We cover all this and more in the inaugural episode of Insight to Impact. Let's jump right into it. Paul, welcome on. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, great to be here. Happy to have a discussion. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So I guess first, give me some of the early context behind yourself, and obviously you've got a pretty storied career. So what's some of that early context that you might want people to know about yourself, just so we can kind of get to know you better?
I guess from an early age, I've always liked to build things, and whatever that is, building anything. Like the earliest memory I could have is when I was 5 years old. I loved building things. I was always tinkering and building something, and then I think that desire to build is kind of what led me to an engineering career, building mega projects, building satellites. So I guess that's kind of the deep down thing that drives me, is to build things and create things and see them work in the end.
Yeah. So was it some of those early projects? Was it just around the house, maybe with the dad or with your parents, or were you just kind of tinkering with stuff on your own?
Tinkering on my own in a lot of cases. My dad was a carpenter, so I was always tinkering with wood and building a project.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I kind of figured out how electricity works, I was trying to think, well, what can I incorporate into these mechanical wooden structures to put in some electrical gadgets or smarts, and always kind of tinkering is what could I create? What could I build? These far off ideas that I had when I was 5 to see what I could imagine and create.
Yeah. Did the evolution of kids' toys from Legos, so the Connect, the erector sets and stuff like that? Is that pretty much what you spent your time playing with?
Absolutely. A little bit of Lego, but in the 80s, the big one I had was Constructs. They're not around anymore. I don't remember those ones. They had the blue kind of knob where you could click on a bunch of different pieces coming off there. And I built so many things with Constructs. I can't even believe that some of the creations I was making, and then seeing, well, how can I make it electrical? How can I add a motor? What could I do to create these contraptions?
Yeah. I'm sure your parents loved to see their young child messing with electricity and dangerous parts.
Yeah. There's a funny picture. I don't remember doing it at the time. I was only probably 4. On one of my dad's construction sites. I'm sitting there. I might have even been sitting in a puddle, and there's a orange extension cord, and I've got it in my mouth. I'm chewing on it. So I hope the other end wasn't plugged in, but maybe that's what sparked some of my early electrical engineering desires.
Pun intended. Definitely pun intended. But what was that like for you, going from constant desire to build and test and maybe break and troubleshoot through some of your younger schooling into your first few years at university?
Break is a good word, because I'd always try and take something apart. There's a VCR that was kind of working but not right, and I thought, well, I can fix it. And I'd take it all apart, and then I'd put it back together, and there'd be a handful of pieces left over, and of course it never worked again. But that was kind of what I was up to. But then I guess it was my mother that first kind of suggested, well, you're always tinkering with stuff. Maybe you'd make a good engineer. And I didn't know what that was at the time. This would have been junior high or something. And I thought, well, maybe I should look into that a little bit more. So as I kind of went through the younger school years, I took more of an interest in engineering and actually figured out what is engineering. And then, I thought this is a good fit to trying to integrate all these design complex components together and
Mhm.
create something and then see it work in the end. So yeah, through that time, I definitely kind of took that guidance from teachers and parents to go towards engineering, and then jump into the engineering world after high school and start going through engineering. Was definitely a, a big change for sure from high school to engineering, but then to see all these other smart people that I'm surrounded with and to learn from them and see, yeah, this is quite interesting how this stuff works.
Yeah, yeah. Did your school have the opportunity to have many like VOTEC courses or shop classes or anything like that?
Some of those options were limited back then. We certainly didn't have in school what my kids have access to now. There was definitely shops class, like woods class, metals class, and I built all sorts of great contraptions in there as well. So I did get some exposure in that regard, but then really got exposure to what is electrical engineering more so in university days.
So at your time in college or at university, did you stay there in Canada, or did you go abroad for school?
I was in Canada at the time. Now they don't do an engineering degree in 4 years. You have to do at least a minimum of 5 years. But
Hmm.
I thought I was crazy enough, and it was still an option. I'm going to do this in 4 years. So that 4 years was absolutely crazy. Not because there was just a lot of hard things to do. It was just a sheer volume of work to try and condense that much learning and classwork into that 4 year period. I can remember days were pretty busy to get through that, to do labs and then working at the same time, a part time job, coming home after a day of university and then working into the evening. It was definitely busy times, but it was certainly thrilling because I just loved to learn. So I was just soaking up everything that I could.
Yeah, yeah. And what is it? What is that coursework like? Even maybe your first semester, or first year or two. It was for yourself, obviously juggling the hectic schedule, but was it just kind of put your head down and get as much work done, or did you find a sort of community of people where you found other people that liked to tinker and other surrounded yourself with other smart or maybe smarter people that you tried to
Definitely both. Yeah, it was a very condensed head down, try and get through this sheer volume of work, but not something you can do on your own. I
Mm.
don't think. I was definitely involved in the school aspects there of other people, other like minded people, learning from them, bouncing ideas off them, seeing what they're learning, sharing notes, of course, and all kind of trying to band together to get through this sheer volume of work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're all in it together. We might as well make it a group effort. So, did you have any sort of notable connections or projects that made an impact early in your college career that made you feel like, yeah, this is without a doubt what I want to do?
The one project I worked on towards the end of university was for a pico satellite, where I was actually part of a group of four of us designing this small miniature little pico satellite. It would be like um, less than 1 foot by 1 foot or 10 centimeters cubed sort of device. And I thought, this is just fascinating that we can build this and get something to actually function. And we created this. Not that it ever went into space, but I thought this is pretty cool that we can design and test this stuff on the ground, and then it could potentially go up into space, which is kind of what led me to the next steps in my career after university.
Which was what?
So I was very lucky, not too far away from where I was going to school. There's a major aerospace hub. So I was evaluating different jobs in the power industry, and this aerospace job came up. I had actually accepted a job in the power industry and was just about getting ready to move out west when I saw this job to design and build satellites, and I thought that sounds pretty cool. I better explore that a little bit more. So, not too far away from here, I was working for a company building satellites and rockets for the Canadian Space Agency, working on payloads that have been on the International Space Station, working on satellites for the Canadian Space Agency, science satellites that were doing science work and investigation for principal investigators out of the University of Toronto, as well as rocket programs for the US and Germany. It was just an exposure to a whole crazy world of very smart people working on very detailed things that had to work, and precision was important. Quality was important. It was a great experience that I wouldn't trade for anything.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds incredible. I'm sure you got to work on, well, I mean, the basically everything you got to work on is something that's just a total blind spot to, 99.9% of the population of the planet.
Yes, so very, very detailed work, like the most detailed design work that I've ever had exposure to. When you're doing electrical spacecraft hardware design for a radiation environment in space, it definitely requires a very particular approach to engineering design. And we would be starting with a blank sheet of paper and given the task of, okay, design a computer to run this satellite in space. And that is like pure design, where you have to figure out how to design these electronics and this embedded software in this mechanical structure in this crazy harsh environment. That is pure design work that was great to work with all sorts of other smart mechanical engineers and electrical engineers and software engineers to see everybody's efforts come together and build these amazing systems. And it would take several years. So everybody's hard effort over those years, and to see it all come together and all function was a huge achievement and very rewarding. And then when you put your design that's functioning on the end of a rocket and launch it into space, I can just remember that feeling of watching it on the screen and just fingers crossed, hoping that everybody's 5 years of effort was worth it, that it's going to work. It's pure adrenaline, and you can see why a lot of people just love that experience to see it all work in the end.
Yeah, and I bet now it seems like there's a renewed interest in either space travel or sort of what comes next. What is that feeling like for you, knowing that you had that experience and you can kind of relate to the challenge and the excitement of that world?
It's incredibly inspiring. I know what it takes to design these things. These are really smart people that are doing cutting edge technology. It really is rocket science, and to see over the last 10 years that just um, revitalize in a kind of a renewed space industry, it's fascinating to see. And it's very encouraging when you see on TV and the room full of people that are cheering. That was me before, to be part of that group team environment of very smart people and to
Mhm.
accomplish great things together. When you're
Yeah,
working with that many smart people and you can achieve great things, that's the part that felt the most fulfilling and amazing, when you can be part of something that's as unique and fascinating as that.
you keep touching on just being surrounded by exceptionally smart people. Did you have any particular like mentor at the time, whether it was on one of those teams or just someone that you knew during that period of time where, again, you're working on extremely technical and intricate work? Was there someone that at the time was sort of a mentor for you?
There was always people yet that I was trying to learn from. It was always a big ambition to find that person that's ahead of you, right? That you can learn from and grow and basically absorb all of their knowledge. So there were several people in the companies I was working with, as well as outside the company as well. The big astronaut at the time when we were going through some of these initiatives was Chris Hadfield, and just to see the things that he had accomplished, it was inspiring to just be part of that, to meet him and have some of our space hardware on missions that he was taking part in, and to be part of this global Canada-wide space community was quite inspiring.
Yeah, yeah, I bet. I'm just out of my own sheer curiosity. What do you think in the space exploration industry? What do you think's next?
It definitely seems to be going in a pretty incredible direction. Like when you see what Musk is doing
Mhm.
with SpaceX and Starship, and just his approach to rapid, fast iteration of test fast, fail fast, learn fast. It's it's hard to know where it's all going to go, if he's going to fulfill his dream. It sure seems like he's taking the steps toward that, to get towards having people on Mars. That seems to be what it's going to take, is those inspiring companies to kind of push the frontier and see where we can go, to the moon, to Mars, and all the incredible technologies that are part of that. Like when you see what's being built in southern Texas, in Boca China, it's just amazing what they've built in such a short period of time.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think was behind the? Obviously, you've got the drive and the personality and uniqueness of someone like Musk, but you say he sort of ushered in the the philosophy of test fast, fail fast. I seem to, at least from my perspective, it might be different from yours on the inside. It seemed like the understanding was this is such high stakes work. Not only is it expensive and intricate and delicate to get right as far as the technology and the math and the calculations, but depending on the mission, it's it's people's lives are on the line, and it felt like everything moved so slowly, even during the era of the space race. It still took years and years, if not decades, to get to the point where they thought, okay, now we're ready to go. And now it seems like hyperdrive, as far as like go, 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 like you said, test fast, fail hard. It doesn't matter. Just figure it out. Do you think, is that solely down to just like the personalities and the people in place, or has technology come that far that it sort of allows that type of mentality?
It's a testing philosophy, right? And I guess it's largely determined by funding. When you've got lots of funding, then you can maybe test fast and fail fast, but that's not always the case. When I remember the days of when I was involved in testing some of these spacecraft systems, there's definitely a philosophy that it has to work, right? When you hit that launch button, there's no reset button in space. The hardware is what it is, and it's a very different philosophy than the projects I moved on to in the power industry, where it almost seems like there's a bit more laid back approach because you can get reliant on that reset switch. You can run down the hallway and hit reset in that cubicle, and you can't do that in space. So
Mm-hmm.
the amount of testing that was required, that was my primary responsibility, was testing spacecraft hardware before it went into orbit. So I spent years testing in a clean room of different operating conditions, temperatures, voltages, everything, to make sure this hardware worked and that we were 100% or as close to 100% as we could get confident that when we hit that launch button, everything was going to work. So it's just, I guess, a different testing philosophy in how you're able to develop and test hardware. That's where that philosophy was largely shaped, to see how the aerospace does everything. So then when I moved into the power industry, it was a very different perspective, where I was coming from this high test environment and precision environment to then see how some of the things were done on our ground-based projects, and that focus on quality just wasn't there. It was more of a relaxed approach as well. We can figure that out later. We can push that down the line. We can do that a year later. And it was almost very surprising to see that approach from the environment I had come from, to know that that's not how this project is going to succeed. And you see that in a lot of projects too, as you kick the can down the road, you make decisions later, and when it comes to commissioning, then things get very expensive to fix, which was a very different approach than I had seen in the aerospace industry, where it had to work. So that's what kind of led me to go down the path of commissioning, in that that's what I had largely done in the aerospace industry, to then try and apply that to projects to help save time and money and bring projects in with a higher level of quality, which I just didn't see in these large capital mega projects that were costing billions of dollars. The focus on quality just wasn't there, as you would see in the aerospace industry, which was hurting projects and costing a lot of money.
Yeah, I was actually curious to know, and you kind of beat me to it. Of, did you find that change in focus away from quality more of like a point of frustration, or more of an opportunity to say, here's the niche that I can make a particular impact on?
Both sides of that, I guess. That there was definitely a sense of frustration, knowing that the decisions earlier in projects weren't being made, that were going to be much more expensive to deal with later, but also understanding the complexities of multi-billion dollar project is extremely complex, with multiple disciplines and thousands of people involved, much bigger than, say, a satellite involved. Is It's a very complex problem to solve, with lots of challenges for sure. But then again, also seeing that as an opportunity, is bringing some of this focus on quality from the aerospace in some of the commissioning programs that I've developed, to help people understand the implications of some of these decisions and how it's going to impact cost and schedule later. I guess that holistic view of helping projects be successful when it comes to on time and on budget completion at the end.
Hmm. Yeah. What were some of the motivators that not necessarily kept you interested in the work? Because it sounds like it's your passion, but I imagine going from maybe what's considered a much sexier industry and more exciting work to going into the power industry where, yeah, the entire nature of the projects and the people, everything about it is different and much slower.
I definitely like the challenge of learning. As long as I'm learning, it's a great experience for me. So coming from aerospace over to power, there was lots more to learn on these complex projects in the whole structured process of how to plan them, how to execute them, and how to complete them in the end. So that's kind of what's always driven me is a quest for knowledge and a deep desire to learn. And on some of these huge projects, there's definitely lots to learn, lots of people to work with, lots of other smart people to see what they know and their approach to projects. That's definitely been my driver to keep interested.
Do you remember what that process was like, actually making the change from sort of the aerospace sector into power and energy? Was it just you looked around in the market to see what was available? Did you know people that you reached out to get into that space?
In my case, it was because I knew people. The market around here is it's a smaller city, so kind of everybody knows everybody. So when you know somebody, then that's a good connection to have to see what leads to the next opportunity. And that's definitely the case in projects too, right? When you're working on projects and large teams of people, you get to know the good people that are working on projects. When they move on to their next project, there's often other opportunities to join them, join their team, and be part of a great team as well. So it was definitely a transition to go from aerospace to power, but new challenges, new people, new things to learn, always exciting.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that the people around you? It sounds like again something that you touch on quite a lot is the impact that the people around you, whether they're immediately in your team or like you said, having sort of line of sight that there's sometimes 10, 12,000 people on one project. Do you think the people around you that you worked with had a big impact on you, or were you more focused on, did you have a plan for yourself, or was it just kind of taking the time to just absorb everything that's going on around you and the people that you're surrounded by?
There's definitely lots going on, so I was definitely dependent on the people around me to seek out the leaders, the experts, the ones with the knowledge that I can work with and learn from and help grow in my career. There's definitely the technical aspects of the work, and you learn a lot from experience, but you learn a lot from the people too, because they're the ones that are guiding the project that you're working with, especially in these huge teams environments. I've been lucky to work on some of these large projects that definitely require large teams with smart people working on satellites, working on multi-billion-dollar capital projects. It's definitely a team environment. Nobody's going to be able to pull any of these huge initiatives off on their own, and you see that in the space industry in general, right? What SpaceX has got going on. There's hundreds or thousands of smart people that are working together to pull this off. So it's definitely a team environment, and it was interesting and frustrating at the same point working in these teams environments, because there'd be certainly lots of great aspects about the team to work with those really smart people. It was inspiring people, but there is always those team dynamics that can be a challenge too, right? When there's someone that maybe doesn't fit in with the team as well or is a bit disruptive to the team. I always found that a bit frustrating too, because I always wanted to do a great job and work with great people. But when there was someone that was kind of upsetting the team environments, it was frustrating to see that and have some of those stumbling blocks.
Yeah, yeah. Where do you see that, where that balance lies of obviously being in a highly technical field and technical industry in general versus the oftentimes what's undervalued or maybe a blind spot altogether is those sort of like human skills, so to speak. Where do you see that balance kind of aligning?
And engineers don't always have some of those softer skills, right? And maybe that was me earlier in my career, where it was it's this way or that way. There's right answer and a wrong answer, right? It's definitely a learned process to understand some of those softer skills to be able to work in these large team environments. And when you're working in a highly stressful environment with lots of cost pressure and lots of schedule pressure, then some there's challenges for sure, right? And some of those softer skills get put aside and others get more aggressive or competitive in those environments, and it becomes very challenging to complete these large initiatives when those sort of dynamics get in the way rather than the rational thought process to work with people and understand that we're only going to be successful if everybody is successful to get through these huge initiatives.
At this point in your career, you've become quite a visible sort of personality in the field, which we can touch on in a minute. But I'm curious to get your perspective on making that, whether you see it as a transition or something that you have to sort of pick up and juggle, going from the whole focus on your career and the development of your career is on your technical ability to deliver. And then it's almost like you reach a certain point, whether you become a manager, director, vice president, whatever, and you're almost sort of, you put in those roles and it's sort of understood or expected that now you know how to manage and you can be a leader and you can manage those conflicts and you can identify those sore spots in the team. I'm curious to get your perspective on the industry sort of today. Do you think there's a good amount of availability as far as resources or communities or people that you can tap into that are trying to deliver that message to the people in the industry, as far as here are the skills that leaders need to lead their technical team? Or do you think that there's definitely room for improvement in that?
I have been exploring some of those questions in some of the discussions I've been posting online to see exactly that, because I do think there is a bit of a lack of that transition, right? And it can be very abrupt, almost like being dropped off a cliff where you've gone through this very technical path. And it's a very common path for engineers, right? Where you've gone through all your technical aspects of your early aspects of your career, but then there's almost an expectation when you get to a certain part in your career that you'll transition into more of that leadership role, like that management role, right? And some people want to do that, other people don't want to do that, but other people are maybe feel compelled that they have to do that because that's just the logical career path that's expected, whether or not they would choose to do that or if they'd like to stay with the technical, because I definitely see it as a very different skill set when you're working in that team environment as opposed to managing, or maybe more importantly, leading that team environment. It's definitely for everyone to make that transition. And I've seen people go into those roles and then step back because they want to stick with the technical. And then I've seen others that step into those management roles and can truly be that inspiring leader to lead these large teams to complete great things together. But I do think there definitely needs to be some more support, some more groups, communities to help people make this transition, because it's not necessarily an easy transition, especially when you've gone through such a technical career path and make that leap into more of those softer skills to lead people. It can be a bit of a transition for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the promising thing is it's not a conversation that can be had, is it's not unique to that one sector. I think it's probably a bit more emphasized in, like you said, a more common, strictly technical path, and the types of personalities that are more suited for that work just naturally don't maybe have the same soft skills as other people. But I think in any industry or in any discipline, at any company, you can find the same problems.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's some of the things I've been exploring online to ask people those types of questions and see what their responses are, particularly when it comes to commissioning, because there's I think it's commonly understood that commissioning would be doing and testing, but then there's a definite leadership component that is a very complex role to lead these large teams and essentially complete a multi-billion-dollar project during the last, say, 6 or 9 or 12 months of a project. It definitely requires really strong leaders to not only manage, but to lead and inspire huge teams with a lot of money on the line to successfully pull off these complex initiatives.
Yeah. Yeah. I would imagine from a leadership standpoint, not only leading those teams, but making sure that all the teams don't, sort of turn on each other and say, yeah, okay, there are these issues here, but at the end of the day, we all are still working towards the same end goal.
And it's a huge challenge on these big projects because at the beginning, the work is kind of carved up into different contracts. You've got maybe your design contract, you've got a construction contract, you've got a commissioning contract. So right from the beginning, the lines are already being drawn of this group, this group, this group, while everybody will start out at the project, everybody's keen, right? But there's a lot of challenges. And when there's schedule pressures, when there's cost pressures, then it's human nature to look inward and protect your own self-interest, right? Which naturally develops these us versus them, like you mentioned. So it definitely requires strong leadership from above to manage the group, develop the culture of the project, and ensure that everybody is still working together as one project group rather than drawing inward and protecting their own self-interest. There's a lot of similarities between starting a business, like a startup culture versus a project. The main difference is that startup would be to continue the company for the longest time possible. The project is a shorter initiative, but the culture, the team dynamics, it's very similar and does require a strong leader in both of those cases to foster that culture and make sure that everybody is focusing on the same end goal, even if that's different than what their individual contract goal is, so that everybody is working together cohesively. It's a huge challenge for sure. I've written about this recently on posting on LinkedIn, referring to it as the Moloch trap. Liv Bowery talks a lot about this, about the Moloch trap in the world, and it definitely applies to projects as well, where the Moloch trap would be people will make short-term decisions to protect their own self-interests, even at the expense of the longer-term goal. I think the example she uses is the king crab industry, that it's in everybody's best interest to harvest as many king crabs as possible. But if everybody did that, then it would destroy the industry, right? Mm-hmm. So for the collective good of the entire industry, there's limits put on to protect that and whatever. That's the idea of a Moloch trap, where you'll make decisions for your own personal gain, even if it's not good for everything. And that's the case on projects too. Just how projects are set up in contracts and how everybody's incentivized is it's only human nature for people to work to their own incentives, even if that's to the detriment of the large project. So it's a complex challenge before. It's not a new problem. It's been around for decades. What the solution is to do that is essentially people, right? The leadership, the people that are leading these teams and being those inspiring leaders to accomplish these great things together, despite all of the day-to-day challenges to get it done.
Yeah, obviously you have the traits of a desirable leader or someone in a leadership position. As like on the commercial side, obviously they need to deliver projects and they need to be within or under budget. That, there's these sort of metrics that you'd think of. But what I think is equally important is their ability to make their team feel like they've got someone not only at the helm, but someone that makes them feel seen and heard and understood and supported, and knows that they're working in everyone's best interest while still trying to make sure that they sort of accomplish their goals as well.
Absolutely, yeah. These projects are complex initiatives, and they only get accomplished by the people that are involved, right? It's essentially the essence of human collaboration when you have these huge teams coming together to build these multi-billion-dollar complex whatever treatment plants, oil and gas, whatever. These are huge team efforts, and it is the essence of human collaboration to accomplish these great things together that we depend on, that we need in our society, that are the underlying infrastructure that we take for granted and depend on to power our homes and provide gas and all those things that we need, right? It's definitely a societal, human, collective effort to make these things happen.
Yeah, it's fascinating that all we see in the general public, or all the public sees, is a new substation or a new power plant, or they see something that might come up on the news about needing to repair and replace certain parts of the infrastructure, but and no one sees sort of the people that are behind that end result, that all they see from a day in and day out basis. They don't really have any real notion of what goes on sort of behind the scenes.
That's right. And there's some huge undertakings that society is taking upon now, right? For electrification, for all the power projects that are being built, for the decarbonization, for EV battery supply chains that don't exist. These are huge industries that there's multi billions of dollars being spent to undertake this new infrastructure. And yeah, it largely all goes on behind the scenes, right? To make these things happen that we depend on day to day and take for granted. But there's a huge construction industry that commissioning is a big part of to make all this happen.
Yeah, yeah. What was the biggest challenge that you faced being a part of one of these project teams?
The people dynamics are always going to be your biggest challenge, right? The technical problems, we can sort out the technical problems. Those are easy, right? But when you're working in teams of thousands of people, everybody has to come together regardless of working in that contract or the other contract. There's only one goal on the project, is to deliver a successful infrastructure at the end of the project. We know the technical decisions. A lot of these projects have been being built for decades. We know the technical solution, but having that leadership to bring the people together to execute to that common vision is always the challenge, right? And that's where it comes down to the leadership of the project to lead and inspire and have these groups of people all working towards the same goal.
There's so many different stakeholders on these projects. There's the different project teams, but then you have the different contractors that are on the project, or you've got people coming and going, only supporting certain scopes of that work. On the one hand, you can understand the complexity of that sort of structure and why all these different groups or companies or contractors, service providers, et cetera, have to get involved. But on the other hand, like you said, that the people problem is always sort of top of mind, and it will always be there. But it seems like it's like a double-edged sword. Like the more groups and the more people and the more division that there is, almost just sort of fuels that fire.
It's almost like a mini society. Sometimes, even especially on remote projects that are out in the middle of nowhere and they've got a construction camp, it is really like a mini society, right? A mini community. Everything that you would have like in a big city is just in this remote location, and you've got lots of different people, lots of different personalities. You've got everybody brings their skills to the project. Some have strengths here, some have strengths there, but it is like a society that is manufactured for this period of time for a few years to accomplish these initiatives. So the same challenges that you would see in a large city exist in this microcosm environment that's being created for this project in a remote location. And all the same challenges exist there as well, right? So the same sort of leadership expectations you would see in a big city, then that's got to be transposed into these communities, environments in remote locations to manage these workforces and teams as well, to lead them to the end of the project.
Yeah. Yeah. I assume at different times in your career, you had that opportunity to go be on site in some of these remote locations.
Quite often, yeah, that was
Yeah.
a key aspect of being part of these projects. Since the pandemic, this whole work remote thing is fine for some jobs, but when it comes to projects are definitely an on-site role. You got to be there. You got to see the equipment, and most importantly, you got to talk to the people. When you're there in that environment, you just hear so much more, right? You might just hear a conversation when you're at the coffee maker or whatever, and it leads to something else that solves a problem on a project. When you're in there, then that in that communication environment, it's you can't do that remotely. You got to be there. You got to see the people. You got to talk to the people. You got to get your boots on and go out there and see the issues firsthand.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the most remote places you've worked in?
In northern Manitoba here, we were working on a couple projects that had remote camps of a few hundred people. So I'd be flying back and forth there regularly to be on site, meet with the people, see the teams. When it comes to HVDC projects, that's an additional dynamic because there's two construction sites. There's one at the end of each end of the high voltage line. So that's just an added dynamic to manage two different job sites and have that come together as one team. Traveling back and forth to the opposite ends of a 1,400 kilometer line adds another dynamic.
With all those different project dynamics, like you said, each project is sort of, while there's components of it that are similar, and you sort of know what to expect. Every project is sort of unique. In your experience, going from working, whether it's directly with the operator or more of like a consultant for that scope of work, where did you sort of find your sweet spot if you were to compare those two things?
I always found the commissioning aspect to be the best part of project, the sexiest part of the project, because that's where you get to see everything work, right? So commissioning is definitely the bridge between the project team and the operating folks to have that transition from the capital world to the operating world. It's definitely a challenging role to be the bridge between those two groups, but I always found it the most interesting and the sweet spot to work with the project managers, work with the construction managers, work with all the groups that are involved, at the same time helping the new project team that's going to be inheriting these assets kind of support that soft transition, bringing them in to the project as early as we can, letting them see some of the activities hands on, become familiar with it so that it's not just here's the keys at the end of the project
Yeah.
and run away. Definitely to give them comfortable so that on day one they know what to expect. They're familiar with the equipment. They've got all their information. They're ready to carry on and continue with operation and maintenance of these new facilities for the lifetime of the assets. And also the one stuck in between the two groups where this group wants that and this group wants that, and trying to bridge those challenges and that balance between the two groups
Mhm.
to make it as smooth transition if we can.
Just kind of pivoting slightly, we touched on a little bit. I know you have some experience either participating in or hosting and running sort of some of these like community symposiums and forums in the commissioning space. Tell me a little bit about that. What sort of piqued your interest in getting involved in those?
So definitely being part of these large projects and seeing some that are doing really well at commissioning, but then seeing others that are struggling quite a bit or even underappreciating the importance of commissioning on projects. There's definitely a gap in the industry. It's existed for a long time and it still exists today and it will probably exist for many years into the future, but there's definitely a lack of understanding of what commissioning is and the value that it provides to projects. I wanted to help at least provide my tiny little part to bridge that gap and help people understand this a little bit. So participating in symposiums to bring the commissioning community together, working online, creating the Industrial Commissioning Association that's free for people to join to help spread some of this information to understand what is commissioning and how can we elevate the importance of commissioning on projects, just to get the information out there more to help projects succeed with this complex phase of commissioning. That's the only way that I know to help people with this complex phase of projects is with more information, with education, with a better understanding of what this all is. There's not going to be, in my mind, there's not going to be any forced regulation as you must do this or you must do that. It's all about communication and helping people understand this. And the only way to do that is with information. So I've been putting information out online on LinkedIn community groups. We regularly host meetups where we have an industry expert present on a certain topic in various industries, just to, not because I pretend to be the commissioning expert, but just to facilitate the conversation. Is the more that we talk about this stuff, hopefully the more the people understand it, the more that people can help other projects be more successful at commissioning, because it's definitely a gap in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and we just touched on several of the gaps, and one of them being it seems like everyone can settle into the pattern of this very technical discussion about the state of the industry. And one of the things that's overlooked is the opportunity for leadership development. And I think starting with that community engagement, just at its core, even if people are getting together to talk about technical project details or the newest advancements, at the end of the day, everyone still, there's a lot of value to be had in everyone gathering and just chatting and getting to know people.
That's right. And it's not going to be an overnight fix. The problem has existed for decades and it's going to exist for many more decades, but I didn't see anybody at least openly online talking about it since the internet was developed. We have this incredible tool, the internet, that allows us to communicate with anybody globally. I just wanted to let's just have the discussion and see where it goes to facilitate the discussion and get everybody's contribution to the discussion. There's lots of commissioning experts out there that can transfer knowledge to the younger groups. Is Here's an area where we can have those discussions and talk about the issues and raise awareness. And it's a slow process, but the more we talk about it, the more we can make progress towards the future.
Yeah, yeah. Is that something that you would could sort of get behind? Is like taking up that mantle and doing your part in saying it's not going to happen overnight, but I'm going to contribute to try and get to that point someday.
Yeah, I'll contribute in any little way that I can, at least facilitating the conversation online. It's Projects are struggling. We know that 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget. They're complex initiatives, and it's not everyone's fault. They're just very complex things to do, and they require a lot of people and everyone's expertise to come together to pull these initiatives off. It's challenging. It's hard. So if I can facilitate the conversation to help discuss about this complex phase of commissioning, then I've opened up the community for anyone to join, and they can join in the discussion and contribute their knowledge and learn from others to see where it goes in the future.
Where do you see that opportunity coming into play where a project has just finished, and whether it's within a particular organization or a project team that's gearing up for their next project, those sort of looking back and saying, okay, here's what we've learned from the last time. This is what went wrong. Here are some measures or things that we can at least make an effort to put in place next time.
And that's where the biggest value comes in. Like when we start using these software systems to manage commissioning, going through that process once is one thing, but when you're going through it a second time and a third time, there's always that feedback loop to improve and better the system for the next projects. Now, everybody's likely been part of a project where there's been a lessons learned session, but most projects are pretty bad at actually applying those lessons learned. Is that lessons learned document gets filed away and everybody moves off to their next project, and it's almost like you start over again on the next one, right? So that's kind of something I'd like to build more as well in our Industrial Commissioning Association, is being that lessons learned repository, so that you don't have to start a project over. When we're doing a lot of these projects, they've been done before. They've been done for many decades. They're not new projects. Of course, the technical details are always project specific, but the process to follow is largely the same. And those lessons learned from a wastewater treatment plant 10 years ago still apply to a wastewater treatment plant today to help projects succeed. In a lot of cases, it's projects are starting out with a blank sheet of paper and how to plan commissioning, and it doesn't have to be that way because that knowledge base already exists. We've been doing these projects for quite some time. That's what I'd like to put together, is bring those knowledge ideas into one place here, help others understand how they can plan for their project. So exactly like you said, that we can incorporate those lessons learned on the next projects and make this easier going forward rather than starting over each time.
I imagine that's got to be a sort of a frustrating kind of moment where someone may be kicking themselves when they finally dust off the cobwebs from that decade old lessons learned document and go, oh, it was right here. We just didn't respect it or didn't take the time to review it.
That's right. It's largely relying on the people, right? If you get that experienced commissioning manager, they come with that knowledge and they can help guide the project if they're brought in early enough on the project. Now, that isn't always the case. They'll come in at the end of the project, so you lose those lessons learned. If that if that person isn't there, that is essentially the process, then there's got to be something else we can fall back on as the process in the absence of the industry expert. That process is well known. It's existed for a long time. It's just that people aren't necessarily aware of it or understand the relevance of a properly structured commissioning process at the beginning of projects and defer that to later when it's too late.
I was just going to talk about timeline. I assume is it pretty much from day one? If you come in on a project and you just go, nope, this is already set up to fail, or what is that process like to kind of get, once you get in on the project and you sort of go through some of your first steps to go, there's definitely some issues here.
Day one, right before EPC contracts are even awarded, commissioning is involved. All the intricacies of that complex interface between construction and commissioning all go into the EPC contract, which is often not the case, right? Because at the beginning of the project, everybody's focused on getting the work started, getting the contracts awarded, getting everybody mobilized to site. Let's get going. It's not a mindset of how are we going to finish the project several years before then, right? But with these complex initiatives, that's what it requires, is that upfront thought process right at the beginning of the projects to start with the end in mind. I often refer to Stephen Covey's habit number 2, right? Is start with the end in mind. And when you've got multi-billion dollars on the line, that's definitely the case, is start with the end in mind. The end in mind is successful commissioning. So you have to have that commissioning mindset right at the beginning of projects if you hope to finish commissioning much years later successfully. And that goes into contracts right before they're even written. So into procurement, into all of our engineering processes during FEED, through construction, completions. It's a commissioning mindset is required through all stages of the project. And that's why you'll hear the commissioning industry experts say that you need to involve your commissioning expert early in projects, is to help instill some of that mindset and guide the team, because they're the ones that know what the challenges are going to be later, and they can help mitigate some of those issues early in the project during contract development, during FEED, so that they don't become much more expensive issues to deal with later.
So at this point in your career, do you see a gap between generation to generation? Are we heading in a good direction? Do you see that there's going to be a shortage of people that are even interested in this type of work anymore?
There's definitely a gap. There's our really wise commissioning experts who have like 40 years of experience, and a lot of them don't want to retire because they love their job, they love what they do, and they're still working. But at some point they will retire and they will take all of their knowledge with them. Now, if that knowledge isn't captured in a process in some sort of structured way to complete projects, or isn't passed to that younger generation, then we're going to lose all that tacit knowledge in the industry. Now, when I talk to people online, there are a lot of people that are taking strong initiatives to make sure that that knowledge is passed down to the younger generation. But I don't see that occurring in a lot of cases. There's other areas of the world where it's almost as if they're caught by surprise, that their industry experts are going to be leaving in 6 months from now, and they're panicking. Well, what do we do? All we've got is paper checklists and spreadsheets. We have no process without our industry experts. There's nobody younger that's coming up into the ranks here that we can transfer this knowledge to. What are we going to do? We've got to panic here in the next 24 months to figure out how we're going to make this transition. I'm not sure everybody's fully thought that through and what that knowledge transfer looks like, but I definitely think there's going to be a lot of challenges in the next 5 to 10 years that we maybe haven't seen in the last 5 to 10 years to complete projects with this industry expertise that will be leaving the industry.
What do you think that, whether it's a structure or a system in place, what do you think that might look like to facilitate not only the transfer of knowledge, but to have that outreach to the younger generation to make those opportunities known and generate that interest?
There's definitely a process to follow to complete projects, right? And there's two ways you can rely on that. You can rely entirely on the people to be your process. You can rely on the industry experts that have done this for 40 years and know intimately exactly how to successfully complete these large mega projects. The problem is when you put all of that reliance on the people, when uh, that person isn't there, you've got nothing to fall back on for process. There's definitely a balance. Is we can't continue to be 100% reliable on the people. We need process defined in how we complete these projects. Now, there are some fabulous tools out there, software systems that can model these commissioning processes for complex projects where we're not as reliant on the people. The people will always be critical to execution of the process, but without a balance of people and process, if you've got nothing to fall back on for process, then when your people are gone, you've got nothing except for spreadsheets and paper to for a process that nobody really knows how to execute anymore. So taking that transition and upgrading to better systems to manage the process is only going to help people that are coming into this, so that it's not on the backs of all of our people, that we've got some process to be able to back up our people so that they can get through this complex phase of projects.
Obviously, right now, what's on everyone's mind and discussions and clips on news or social media that you see is the effects and impact that AI is having on every industry right now. And you talk about the need and the value of software and systems to actually facilitate that the transfer process and actually putting it in place. Do you find that type of technology and the development in AI and machine learning more of a threat or an opportunity in the commissioning space?
For commissioning, I see it as an opportunity, not in the way that a lot of people would think. These are complex jobs. These are jobs that require leadership, real thought processes, complex engineering decisions. When the robots have taken over all of our jobs, these complex thought process jobs will be the last ones to go, in my
Yeah.
mind, I think. But there is an opportunity to help with a lot of this data management. Projects are only getting more and more complex. There's more documents being generated. The SCADA systems generate more and more data. There's just a crushing amount of information that's available on projects, and there's no one person that can manage all that information. We need systems, we need processes to help us manage this. But this is almost the perfect use case for AI. When you're generating these huge volumes of data, if you're using commissioning software properly, if you're managing and gathering all of this data, then that's ripe for the picking. That's what AI wants. And if you can apply these AI tools to these large data set volumes that exist on projects, there's a huge opportunity to help us manage this information, make sense of this information, and on a real-time basis, hour by hour, minute by minutes on projects, decipher all of this information and make real-time decisions with it. The projects that aren't doing that, that aren't collecting data, that are still on spreadsheets or not even collecting any of their data and not taking advantage of these AI tools, they're the ones that are going to get left behind even more, as opposed to the companies that are keeping up and advancing and leveraging the power of these AI tools to actually make completing projects, managing this huge volume of data and getting through all this complexity much more easy by leveraging these AI tools. Now, it is a significant jump, and I'm not sure everybody's quite ready for it. When someone's been only using spreadsheets and paper checklist, to tell them that they're going to jump to a system that's using AI is a pretty big jump, right? You're probably going to have some baby steps in between there, but over the years, if you build up these systems, build up companies' capabilities, and get to these more advanced tools, it's going to be, I think, quite powerful and quite cutting edge to be able to help us complete projects much more efficiently rather than just the brute force method of get out there and get it done.
I suppose for yourself and your own career, what sort of challenges are you working on right now? 12, 18 months. What have you got in the works? What are some of your goals?
That the biggest challenge is always the mindset of the way that it's always been done, right? And that's where some of the lessons learned gets dropped is it would be fantastic to just accelerate that thought process a little bit more, where let's take a different approach to this next project. Let's use some of these tools. Let's see how we can adapt and evolve and approach these complex problems from a different angle. That's the biggest challenge, is the way it's always been done. So I'll help in my little way, any way that I can, to facilitate that discussion, maybe help people think about some of these things a little bit differently, so that we can leverage some of these tools and help us complete projects. So some of the things that I've been working on to do that is with the Industrial Commissioning Association. We've got over 1,200 members right now, and it's growing quite a bit, maybe 50 or 100 members each few weeks. So there definitely seems to be some interest in quest for knowledge to try and understand some of this stuff. And the community is open to anybody that wants to understand what this commissioning business is all about and get some baseline of information. So I encourage everybody to join. It's free. The information is there. We have regular discussions to talk about commissioning, to further the knowledge in the industry. So that's one thing I've got going on. And then for anyone that's interested in becoming more of the commissioning leader on projects, we've got our suite of training to help people make that leap into commissioning leadership roles, to properly plan and execute commissioning so that we can plan for successful completion of our projects. So that's our commissioning academy that we've put together to help people understand this complex phase of projects. The more people that understand commissioning, the better our projects will be. I don't think anybody intentionally avoids commissioning. It's a complex phase of projects, right? And it's not well understood and not known how it fits into projects. It's still maybe viewed as an additional unnecessary expense. People ask, well, do we really need commissioning? Well, that's just because they just don't understand what it's all about, right? So the more information we can get out there, the more we can help people understand this from all phases of projects, from procurement groups to project managers to construction groups to people in the commissioning industry. The more knowledge we can get out there, the better people understand this complex phase of projects. Then we can plan for more successful projects, which is, of course, everyone's end goal here, is to complete projects as efficiently as we can, on time and on budget.
Sure, absolutely. Well, Paul, I really, really appreciated this discussion. I learned a lot. I think the listeners are definitely going to enjoy hearing your story and your insights, and I'm excited to see how your professional association grows and the things that you guys tackle. And like I say, I'm happy to help spread that message any way I can.
That's great. Appreciate it. Yeah, great discussion. Thanks for the opportunity.